Hello again, everyone. This is Sienna from Dragon Trail Interactive, and thank you very much and welcome to everyone for joining us for the October edition of our monthly webinar series. The topic of today's presentation is looking at what is being done and what tourism destinations and businesses can do to contribute to promoting sustainable tourism, and especially sustainable tourism from China. Obviously, the freeze of international tourism due to COVID-19 has really been a staggering challenge for our industry and continues to be so, but it does give us some time to pause and think about what we want tourism to look like when it comes back, and what kinds of things we can do now to make sure that when tourism does return, it's in a way that does good rather than harm to local communities, wildlife, and local environments. And I think this kind of tourism will ultimately be better for the tourists as well, to have an experience with a more positive impact. So these are the kinds of questions that we will be discussing today. We are really lucky today to have a trio of expert speakers to present to us. So my role will really just be to moderate rather than to present. But this is part of a monthly webinar series that Dragon Trail has been organizing for more than 3 years now. As the company is a digital marketing agency focused on Chinese outbound tourism, our webinars, as well as the other resources that you can find on our website, including reports and videos, are focused on Chinese outbound tourism as well as digital marketing for a Chinese audience. Dragon Trail has been around for 11 years now and is headquartered in Beijing with offices in Shanghai and Xi'an, as well as international offices in London, where I'm based, and in Lexington, Kentucky in the US. We work with international, tourism brands and businesses from all around the world to help them to connect to Chinese consumers, as well as to the Chinese travel trade. And you can find much more information about our work and our services, as well as many helpful free resources on our website, dragontrail.com. So presenting today, we are really lucky to have 3 speakers who all have extensive experience in promoting sustainable tourism from China. First up, we'll have Zheng Yu, who is campaign manager at World Animal Protection China. Following on that, we'll have a presentation from Schubert Loh, who is Chief Operating Officer at the Trip.com group, which was formerly known as C-Trip and is Asia's and China's largest OTA. And then last but not least, we have Roy Ariel, who is Managing Director of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. So all of these speakers have really spent their careers focused on travel development, animal welfare, and environmental protection, and we're really looking forward to hearing from them today. So the way today's webinar will work is we'll start with presentations from each of our speakers that will be around 10 minutes each, and then we will all join together for a Q&A session at the end. If you do have questions for the speakers, you can send those in at any time during the webinar by using the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel, and then we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar should last for about an hour. Before we get started, I also would like to just do a bit of housekeeping to let you know that I will be following up with all of you tomorrow to send you a PDF of the slides from today's presentation, so you'll have those for reference, as well as a link to a recording of the webinar if it's something that you would like to watch again, or perhaps share with friends and colleagues who you think might be interested and weren't able to attend today's live presentation. So now I would like to hand over to Zheng Yu to talk to us about why the future of tourism is, and indeed must be, wildlife friendly.
Thank you, Sienna. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about wildlife friendly travel here. And before we start, I would like to introduce our organization, which called World Animal Protection first. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, who is wild animal protection? We are a non-profit organization, has 14 different country offices around the world. Our headquarters is in UK, and all of our work are all based on animal welfare science. There are, you can see, we have 4 main program areas, and I was working under the animals in the wild program and to working about tourism and wildlife. Yes, and as been to the wildlife friendly tourism, nowadays you can see it become more and more popular right now. We found that across the world there are thousands of wild animals are held in captivity situation to provide tourist entertainment, just like the photos in the slides you can see. But their welfare is severely compromised. For example, elephant rides, take a tiger selfie, or see a dolphin show. Such kind of wild animals might suffer because they might be early separated from mothers and have intense and very crucial training and living in very inadequate situations. Most importantly, the use of wild animals for tourist entertainment activity is one of the key drivers of the global wildlife trade. It endangers species and the global ecosystem. So wild animal protection starting a campaign called Wildlife is Not Entertainers since 2005. Since then, to 2014, it became a global campaign across different countries, also in China. And we want to phase out the use of wildlife for tourist entertainment. Yeah, next slide, please. Here are more figures and facts. Because the wildlife tourism provides tourists to access with the wild animals and with nature, so it's developed into a very huge industry right now, and it might affect a huge number of animals, tourists, and communities around the world. You can see if the wildlife tourism is responsible and sustainable, it can benefit or contribute to conservation of wildlife and their habitats. But unfortunately, most of the wild tourism activity in the markets right now is not help wildlife protection as they claimed. Instead, they might cause pain or suffer to the animals. The research showed that over 550,000 wild animals may suffer in very poor condition to entertain tourists. And we found that however, this actually not intend to hurt wild animals. Majority of the tourists participating in wildlife tourism activities, mostly because they love nature, they love wild animals, and they don't aware it might, the activities they take, they might have negative animal welfare impact. And yeah, so next slide, please. Yeah, how we work about with this issue. Most of our work, we have a lot of research and science-based evidence, and most importantly, we are engaged with the travel industry and tourists. In China, we are building public awareness about this issue, and we want to changing tourist behaviors to reducing the demand. And yeah, we also engage directly with travel company like tour operators, venues, so they could stop sale and promotion crew activities, and encourage to support for wildlife friendly alternatives. And we catalyze alternatives solutions by transition elephant venues in Thailand. Right now, we have two transition venues is already opened in Thailand, and these two venues was become before they were riding elephants, elephant show camps, but right now they become hands-off, observe only elephant camps. So such kind of work is still going on, and yes, and also we also drive policy works in different countries. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, and we also found a positive signals in the market that the good side is the global attitude trend is changing. This data is before the pandemic. We found there is an online survey showing that the acceptability of riding an elephant is dropping by 12% across the world. That means including riding elephants, animal-related entertainment activities has all decreased. And when presented to with a choice to tourists, they are much prefer that seeing wild animals in their habitat and seeing a real behavior at wild animals, not in a show or ride them. Yeah. And next slide, please. Yeah, here is another. Here is also we also find that the attitude is changing among Chinese public about wildlife in entertainment as well. There is another face-to-face survey in Thailand showing that Chinese tourists who is riding elephants and watch elephant show in Thailand has dropped by 13% and 26% respectively from 2016 to 2019. This trend also shows that Chinese tourists are more prefer elephant-friendly travel. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, here is another survey. It's about millennials on animal-friendly travel in China, and we as the main force of tourism consumption, that millennials, those young tourism, was have higher decision making power and influence in tourism behavior. So the study is in the study we found that the young tourists in China think more about animal welfare right now, and you can see that more than 85% object to tourism activities that cause harm or abuse to animals. And you can see that even 80% of them were even willing to pay higher prices. Yes, nearly 90% believe that animal-related tourism activities should be closer to nature status. That means in the habitat or see wild animals in the wild. Yeah, next slide, please. Not only tourists attitudes and the behavior is changing, but also the travel company is they're also taking a lot of actions to help in changing this demand. Right now in the campaign, Wildlife is Not Entertainers, there are over 260 travel brands commit to stop sale and promote of elephant entertainments, including elephant rides and shows to support elephant-friendly alternatives. Yeah, next slide, please. In the campaign, we also make up a coalition called Coalition for Ethical Wildlife Tourism. By working together, the coalition members aims to prove a strong demand and support for venues to become wildlife friendly and drive the industry standards. Here is the list of members in the coalition. You can see Airbnb and ANVR, Booking.com, and you can find more information in the link. Next slide, please. Yeah, here in the pandemic, it is very crucial that rebuild the tourism industry to be more resilient and responsible. It's become a urgent and important topic. The pandemic has challenged us. That also show a spotlight on how people treat wildlife and what's the relationship between people and wildlife, especially in tourism too. And you can see that we found 60% of emerging infectious disease are zoonotics. That means originated from animals, which over 70% of them are originated from wild animals. So the demand and exploitations of wild animals might expose us to disease like COVID-19, put us all at risks. Yeah, so in the tourism activities, you can see those close interaction with wildlife might have both safety risk and the public health risks in future. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, we want to see that as a member of travel industry, you can help prevent another pandemic and by become a wildlife friendly travel companies to stop sale such kind of entertainment activities. And we believe that the future of tourism is wildlife friendly. It will not go back to the old normal. So it's time to build a new and more sustainable industry together. Thanks for attention. Thanks, Sienna. That's all from me. You are mute.
I know. Thank you so much, Jungyu. It's very good to see some positive directions that were happening with public attitudes around the world and for the Chinese market over the past couple of years. And also very eye-opening to see that this is not just about animal welfare, but even about preventing future pandemics. So something that we really do need to take very seriously. So on that note, I'd like to move on to the next presentation from Schubert Loh. He's Chief Operating Officer of the Trip.com Group, which is truly one of the most famous and successful tourism businesses in China as well as the world. So welcome, Schubert.
Thank you, Sienna. Appreciate that. So again, it's an honor to be here, to be with you, and then sharing some of our data and insight with you, and hopefully that can provide more information about how China are doing in terms of sustainability. So let's go to the next slide. As you probably know, in China, there was a Golden Week holiday, which is the longest holiday of the year, where people get to travel within the country. Obviously this year we cannot go outbound, so all the demand has been within the country. And because of the pandemic, even though in China is somewhat under control, people are still very careful. So all the attractions are still implementing rules and regulations to trying to really control the flow of the traffic that's in the attraction location. And which then actually brings a good insight, which is while we're doing prevention here, we actually are setting up additional steps to help us to control the flow of traffic, which could potentially be something that we can use for sustainability down the road. So here are some facts. During Golden Week, the number of visitors are controlled at 75% of the capacity of their attraction, and that's implemented by the government. So none of the attraction location can go surpass that amount. And at the same time, they're doing 50% traffic control during first 4-hour windows, which means in the morning, the location can only have 50% of capacity of the 75. And in the afternoon, the other remaining 50 can enter into the attraction. So that will then be able to control the flow of traffic much better than what we were able to do before. And on top of it, what we've been looking at is this online reservation, meaning that in order for you to go to any particular attraction, you must make a reservation ahead of time. And that's never been heard in the China market, but this is a new thing because of the pandemic, which then also triggered the use of ticketless electronic way of entering the attraction, meaning there are scanners in location that scan the QR code, and the users can then just take their their phone device and then be able to enter without actually buying and purchasing and throwing away paper tickets. On top of it, there's also temperature checks and health checks at the gates to make sure that nobody's have any sort of medical condition. I think all of these preventive measures have added ways for us to look at sustainability down the road, meaning that we have never been able to implement any kind of traffic control to a large scale in the past. And we have never really looked into ticketless all that much. But now with everything that's been implemented in the last month or so, we are able to see that being implemented at a nationwide level, which to me is a very good sign that when we are back to normal after COVID, we should be able to continue with some of these practices that we never were able to do. At a company level, let's go to the next slide. At the company level, and this is what we are also helping and implementing. On a very grand scheme of things, many industry participants has been impacted. So what we've been doing is be able to kick off what we call a travel on campaign with awareness of sustainability. First of all, we're sharing critical data with our partners to understand where the user demands are, because that has been changing throughout the last few months. And on top of it, we are actually working to improve our customer service in terms of refunds, rescheduling, to make people be able to readjust their travel plans accordingly. And third, we're working with a lot of suppliers to adjust their supply in a way that are more friendly to the user and also be able to comply with government regulations in terms of traffic control. So if we go to the next slide, you should be able to see this is the scale we're implementing this program. So the Travel On program has been implemented from the Trip.com group, partnering with the World Travel and Tourism Council, as well as Google to provide some critical data. And partners, including airlines, including many of the hotel chains, and also tourist attractions have participated in the program and tried to restart the industry in the right way. If we go to the next slide, really talk about the timeline of our implementation for the program. At the very beginning, in January, we've been putting a lot of the safeguard information out to our users, understanding what is safe to do and how do you go about doing cancellation if you need to, and be able to provide information that's critical for people that have purchased tickets and not sure when or where they can actually go. And after which, then we have gone into the launch of the program in May with the WTTC as well as the other partners to make sure all the locations have fulfilled the safety standards that the WTTC has set forth. And from then on, then we have slowly gone into a campaign where we have selected locations that are safe to travel and then start promoting some kind of promotion and discount, allow some of the industry to restart at the right pace. So from June onwards, you can see we have put out numerous programs, including the initiative, the Travel On Fund to help some of the industry to jumpstart, and also the flexible booking guarantee, which allow people to make changes at the last minute and not to worry about the condition changing with COVID second wave and what have you to influence their travel plans. And on top of it, we also have tried additional media we call Trip.com Live that allow people to better understand what's currently happening and be able to purchase the right type of package or hotel stay based on the condition in the location. And let's go to the next slide and briefly talk about the product features we have also put together to really help the sustainability. So to start, we have worked on what we call the travel inspiration phase, meaning really educating people to say, hey, because of the pandemic, you now have to travel to different places domestically. And within domestic boundary, there are many other locations that you're not familiar with that are actually quite attractive. So this is the able to really disperse the travel population to different locations without causing over tourism in the top destinations. And this has been proven quite useful, especially when people are really looking for places to go domestically. And many of them have been to the popular places and they're looking for alternatives. So this has been a very good way of helping them to understand what those locations are. Second, really is talking about the flexible booking and an online reservation feature that we have worked with all the attractions to build. In turn, you have to come onto our application and say which day you're traveling and if there's any ticket for sale on that time. And then you have to do that something like 24 hours ahead of time before you can enter into the attraction. So that feature has been implemented across multiple attractions on our app, and that's been proven very successful in doing crowd control in that context. And finally, we are also putting in very important information about recycling and one-time usage control in certain in-destination checklists that we have sent out, which really is a friendly reminder to our users that they should pay attention to all the sustainability behaviors that we are really trying to promote, and hopefully they can bring that exercise to their friends and family. So with that, I think we have done quite a few steps to help us to go much faster into sustainability tourism if we do recover quickly in the next 6 to 9 months. With that, I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And Sienna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Hubert. It's very interesting to see how technology can be used to help manage tourism and cut down on issues like over-tourism, which then is better for communities because it means that the money is spread out to more businesses and more destinations. And it's also better for the tourists because nobody wants to be packed in there with all of the other tourists trying to see the same thing. So on that note, I am now going to hand over control of the slides to Roy Ariel to introduce to us the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and some important considerations in our understanding of what sustainability in tourism really means.
Just 1 second, I see that. Need to set my camera on and it's stuck. Just 1 second. Okay, should be able to see me now, right? Okay. Hi, and good local time to everyone for joining this interesting webinar, and thank you for the previous speakers. I'd like to first give a short introduction about the China Sustainable Travel Alliance that was launched last month. It was launched by WWF in China with key associations and companies in travel and tourism sector to commit to actively protect the environment and work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. For those that will read the presentation that Sienna will send tomorrow, you can click this link and see a video that was created last month when the Alliance was launched. The initiators of the Alliance are led by WWF China with GSTC and other strong tourism entities within China, such as Trip.com Group, Kaisa Tourism, and other GSTC members such as Vinetree, China Standards Conformity Assessment, TUI China, and also soon are joining us, such as Intrepid and Big DMC. So you see that it's quite a strong network of the members of the Alliance. Now, the beginning of it is by WWF China focus on these three topics when they work with the tourism industry in China. The first is issues of wildlife, the habitat destruction, illegal poaching, and the unsustainable exploitation. Of course, we know that threaten the natural resources and global biodiversity. We see that millions of species are already being now considered endangered. And as we've heard before from Eugene, that it also increases the zoonotic diseases like COVID-19, all come from illegal wildlife trade. The second issue to curb is plastic pollution. There have been 1/3 of the plastic waste is estimated to enter, that have already entered the seas, the rivers, and the lakes. And it's something that, of course, affects us all as humans. And the third is food waste. And it is a global, the food produced for human consumption is lost and wasted every year. It's very large, and it's a strong contributor to greenhouse gases, waste of resources, and eventually pollution. So these three things are core issues that the tourism industry has some involvement to a degree, as we've heard from World Animal Protection on the example of interaction with wildlife, but it also mainly includes less the living wildlife, but more consumption of products from wildlife, illegal products, I should also mention. The plastic pollution is something that anyone who's been here to a hotel or an accommodation or went on a tour knows that you will come across plastic pollution. And food waste is something that, well, we go to a place to enjoy the food. When I go to Shanghai, I want to try the specialty food in Shanghai. And when I go to Xi'an, well, that's something different. But if the food is being wasted, then that's a crucial issue. So these three things are core issues that WWF China identified as something that is easily can be focused on within the alliance and work together with the other private sector and the public sector in the alliance. I'll just share that the policies and actions in China by the Chinese government support this. We see a number of actions that have been done related to illegal wildlife trade. In 2017, there was the official ban on ivory trade. In 2018, the note on strict usage and operation of rhino, tiger, and other products that come from illegal wildlife trade, especially we're talking about rhinos, tigers, pangolins, and elephants. And earlier this year, there was another clear, comprehensive ban on the wildlife trade, consumption, and wildlife that also hit a lot of the international news media. There's been also actions on reduction of plastic pollution. In 2020, there's been formal opinion by the National Development and Reform Commission on ending the use of single-use plastic straws. And of course, reduction of food waste. A few years ago, the General Office of the State Council issued also a formal opinion on opposing the food waste. So the Sustainable Travel Alliance goals are mostly to promote the concept of sustainable tourism within the tourism sector in China and Chinese actors. And the actions that the Alliance call on are stopping the illegal wildlife trade, reduction of non-essential and single-use plastic usage, reducing food waste in the tourism industry, especially by hotels, and the use of the GSTC criteria, which is the existing and publicly available international criteria for sustainable tourism practices that is maintained by the organization that I come from, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. So let me share a few short background on what the GSTC and the GSTC criteria are. The GSTC establishes and manages global sustainable standards for the tourism industry, known as the GSTC criteria. Economic, environmental, and societal dimensions are all addressed by the GSTC criteria, and applying the GSTC criteria helps to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals. A report from Booking.com last year showed that 70% of global travelers say that they would be more likely to book an accommodation knowing it's eco-friendly, whether they were looking for it or not. And this specific report, because it's been conducted by a large and well-known OTA, this has been very influential, and a lot of tourism organizations and companies have put notice, and also their own reports and surveys showed similar trends. And it refers to global travelers. Of course, it includes the Chinese travelers. So this is a formal definition of sustainable tourism. Tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, environment, and host communities. And just a few notes about sustainable tourism. It doesn't refer to a specific type of tourism, like a niche market such as ecotourism, nature tourism, cultural tourism. No, it's actually an inspiration for all tourism, all forms of tourism, to act in a more sustainable manner, to apply sustainability practices. In that case, any business, anything, anyone that is involved in the tourism industry has a role to play and can influence everyone by applying the sustainability practices. Just a quick note, sometimes in the Chinese translation, there is sometimes also in English a mix between ecotourism and sustainable tourism. So again, these are two different things. Ecotourism is a niche market that has a very specific form of the product and service of what it offers, while sustainable tourism refers to all the tourism industry. But how do we actually recognize what sustainable tourism is? And that's where things become quite difficult, because there are hundreds of labels, of schemes, of standards, of criteria out there. Some are country specific, like Ecotourism Kenya, or perhaps the Nordics one, or something else that Costa Rica Sustainable Tourism Standard. So some of them are very country specific, while some are global. And this creates also a confusion, because there are so many options. How do we know which one is good? How do we know which one is valid? How do we know that? And that's why in 2007, the UN Foundation, together with the UNWTO, UNEP, Rainforest Alliance, WWF, and about 32 other organizations from the public and the private sector, came to establish the GSTC to manage these, to create two sets of criteria that can be used as a framework, and then we can understand how the other schemes are by comparing them. So the first one is the GSTC criteria for the industry. Sorry, I see now that there is a small mistake in the Chinese. It should, of course, say industry and not destination. And the second one is criteria for destinations. Following the ICL Alliance of setting sustainability assurance frameworks, the GSTC every few years revise and reviews and revise the criteria and update it to address current and evolving trends. The GSTC criteria has 4 pillars. Therefore, it is holistic and covers the whole perspective of what sustainability can mean. One is the sustainability management. The second is social and economic benefits. The third is the cultural heritage. And the fourth, the environment. So when we speak about, many times when people think about sustainable tourism, some only think about the environmental aspect. We need to remember that there is also a cultural aspect, there is also a social aspect, and a holistic view of sustainability in tourism must include them all. The GSTC criteria are worldwide applicability. They've been developed through a very rigorous process and consultation throughout the world, receiving details and inputs from organizations that specific professional organizations from different communities all around the world, from minority groups, from the public sector or the private sector. And it's also suitable for all types of countries, as we've seen over the past 10 years, and it's now being used by a number of destinations and countries around the world. It's also good for large and small entities. It can be used by a large group such as tour group and can be used by a small hotel. It's also relevant for rural, urban, and natural areas, and takes into consideration traditional communities. As I mentioned, by using the GSTC criteria to improve the sustainability practices of tourism businesses, it also helps to achieve and promote the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a quick reference of some of the GSTC members, and some of them operate within China, some operate globally. We operate, and we have interaction with of course, a lot of entities all over the world. And just to conclude my short and rush presentation. So the Sustainable Travel Alliance in China was established due to the demand and support from large organizations such as Trip.com that we've seen. And this allowed this year, regardless of COVID-19, to establish such an important alliance. The second is the focus of the alliance is on the combating of illegal wildlife trade, the reduction of single-use plastic, and reduction of food waste, especially by the hospitality industry. And the third point is the focus, the promotion of the use of the GSTC criteria as the global sustainable standards that cover societal, environmental, and economic aspects, and can be promoted as an existing framework to use within the travel industry. For those that would like to learn more, you can also visit the GSTC website. Unfortunately, we don't have yet a Weibo, it's coming soon. You can find there also translations of the GSTC criteria into many languages, including Chinese, both traditional and simplified Chinese. You can also find the translation to many other languages. And if you would like to contact me, you can find the information on the website. Thank you very much. Sienna?
Hi, just coming back. Thank you so much, Roy. So before, I think this is very interesting, and I like the idea of sustainability, not just being ecotourism and not just focused on one thing or another, because it really does encompass many things, including impact on local communities as well as local environments. So before we move into the Q&A section, just very briefly, I wanted to let those of you who might not know about this to tell you about a report on responsible tourism from China that Dragon Trail published about exactly a year ago. And this report addresses things like over-tourism, impact on wildlife, as well as impact on local environments. And this report is free, and if you would like a copy, please just drop me an email and I can send that out to you. I will also be following up today's presentation by putting together an article with some main takeaways from the presentation too that will be published on the Dragon Trail blog next week. So if I could get all of the speakers to join now, I've got some questions that I'm very curious to ask you, as well as questions coming in from the audience as well. I think at this point I'll probably stop my screen sharing so we can just see all of us. So thank you all so much for your presentations and showing us kind of different aspects of what is important when we talk about sustainability and the future of tourism. So the first question that I would like to ask today is something that I am curious about, and also relates to a question that we have sent in from Wolfgang Gerald from the China Outbound Tourism Research Institute. And he asks, what is the best way to increase the sustainability of Chinese outbound tourism after it becomes possible again? And this is something I'd like to ask you, Schubert, because we can see that very effectively with some of the kind of caps on entry and the need to reserve a place, that domestically in China, you have helped with kind of limiting visitor flow and making sure that destinations don't get overwhelmed with numbers of tourists. So what are your ideas about how to potentially export this model or encourage Chinese tourists to be more dispersed when they do go back to traveling overseas?
That's a great question, and this is just my personal take. I think it's a combination of enforcing regulation. If there is no regulation, then we should set up regulations, and the use of platforms to do education. So let me get into a little bit more detail. I think with the COVID standard on mask wearing, traffic flow, you must do online reservation ahead of time. I think many of the Chinese users are now used to the new processes or new regulations they have to follow, meaning they will at least pay attention to say, oh, before I go some new places, I must check on what needs to be done properly. And we have seen examples even in pre-COVID days, for example, in Thailand. In order to enter a Thailand temple, you must cover yourself. And these are rules and local regulations that have been imposed, and Chinese tourists strictly follow those rules. So I think it's really be able to have local tourism destinations to come up with their own list of here are my criteria and regulations, and then work with big platforms like Booking, ourselves, and many other companies that have the information to the tourists on, hey, this is actually what you need to be doing when you go to that destination. I think with the enforcement and the education, I think they become more realistic in implementing some kind of sustainable model.
Thank you. I'm just going to check another question that got sent in, which is for Zheng Yu. And this ties in a little bit with a question that I wanted to ask you as well, too. So as you said, there's 5 times more money earned from wildlife tourism than from the illegal wildlife trade. But where does this money go? Does most of it go back to local communities? And how can we assure that the majority of the funds go back to the habitat and wildlife management and to local communities? And I guess I would like to maybe pair that up, because I had a question for you that's really about kind of money and local communities too, where we can see some destinations, they do make a lot of money from animal entertainment, things like dolphin shows or taking photos with tigers. So how do you encourage places like that or businesses like that to move away from these harmful things that are making them money?
Yeah, thank you, Sienna, and thank you for the questions from the attendees. And they are really, really great questions, and it is really hard to answer from how to say one sentence, because as I said, the wildlife-related tourism is become huge right now, and some was earned by the tickets and what's like the related industry supply chain in them. But I can So how we can manage them and back them to the local community is very crucial. I can give an example about the elephant venues in Thailand. We can see the venue, if they were riding elephants there, and the staffs as also but when the tourism is demand is going on and there is more workers in the community, but we found that their payments is still very low, and their trainings is lack of trainings, low of capacities. So it's also not benefit for the local community people. But if it need to manage a more responsible way, like we want them to transfer to elephant friendly, that might be give more care about not only elephants, but also the community, like the workers, like the local people, and who also can be benefits from that kind of in-source. And yeah, that I think that is a good one. And for the destinations, as you said, those was a lot of tourism activities like dolphin shows. I think it's also very important. They may need to know that the future markets is changing. Like people are like more nature related or animal real behavior activities. So they might find that might be more appeal to nowadays the tourists to become a responsible tourism, but not only to provide such kind of activities like in the close interaction with the animals, like the animal shows. It's like out of date today. So for the destination, they need to be also transition to more friendly way. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting to see that maybe because of education efforts from organizations like World Animal Protection, it can change market demand, and then that can put pressure on the destinations to change the model of animal tourism that they have. So that is very positive. I have a question that I would like to ask Roy, and this is relevant to this year and the years to come. And it's, how do you think that COVID-19 could impact the sustainability of tourism? Do we have any risks of potential negative effects, such as, for instance, people using more single-use plastic, or perhaps not wanting to take public transportation, taking things like private jets and private cars? And what kinds of things can we do now to make sure that the impact of the pandemic is not one that's negative on the environment?
Right, so there are quite a few very clear negative impacts. Of course, the single-use plastic on the environmental perspective, but on the socio-economical perspective of millions of people that have lost their jobs this year. And of course, it influences everyone. But let me perhaps focus on the more positive and optimistic perspective that I see. One, we see more support and stricter ban and enforcement of the illegal wildlife trade. Another issue is that we see, especially within Asia-Pacific countries that have been more successful in containing the pandemic, people now go back to travel. And when they travel, they look for more details, just like what Schubert showed earlier, that on trip.com, now you can see more details. If over here, you will need to do a temperature check or something like that. So in that sense, all those that have been interested in the sustainability perspective want to be a responsible traveler, they will search and they will look, they already do that, for information about hotels and tour operators. How do they operate? What are their sustainability policy? What are their social policies as well? So that's something that is quite positive. And I can say that from interacting with a number of partners that this demand is getting higher. Another positive part is going from destinations that had the problem of being with over tourism, they went into being under tourism, but now they have some time to understand how to better control the traffic and manage the carrying capacity and visitation regulations. So some of the destinations in China in May, there have been unexpected amount of people that came to national parks after not being able to travel for a while. So that was quite troubling. But then very fast, they started already many destinations, not only China, but in many other places, already use more advanced systems to manage the flow of visitors. And that also allows better dispersion of tourists to secondary and less popular destinations. And from that perspective, of course, it has a potential to curb the over-tourism of the popular destinations, but also help to develop those more remote areas that are now become more popular due to their remoteness, due to that they are not that place that has many other people that might be just next to you. So there are some positive aspects to it. But again, we should remember that there are a lot of negative aspects. Of course, the loss of life and the loss of jobs. But we as humans should stay optimistic and look at the opportunities ahead.
Thank you. I've got another question from the audience that is, it's for you, Roy, but I think, Jung-Yu, it's also something that you touched on in your presentation. And it's about the tightening of restrictions on the wildlife trade in China. And how is this taking effect in China? Is it being accepted? And what can tourism do to support those kinds of regulations? So maybe Jung-Yu, if you would like to answer that question first.
Okay, thank you, Sienna, and yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's really how to say at the beginning of the pandemic, you can see China takes a very big decision making about banning the wildlife eating. And right now, it's also working on the revise the wildlife protection law right now. I think at this kind of movement, people was starting to think about the relationship between human and the wildlife. So in some of the level, I think a lot of people will be more accept or raise the acceptance of wild animal protection in China, So, and in our culture, I think it's also embedded in the Chinese culture, be kind to animals. It's just that I think there should be more regulations and should be more awareness to the public that what is right and what is wrong, how to manage it, and also very importantly, the industry should be looking forward to take more positive actions and to help these regulations to become true. So that is not only one members can change the situation, but need the whole society working together and to make this wildlife management or wildlife protection more towards to a good way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Roy, did you have anything that you would like to add to that?
I think that Jung-Yu covered it much better.
Okay.
Let's leave it like that.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I still have many questions that I would like to ask all of you because you are such experienced experts in this topic, but we are kind of getting to the end of our hour. So I just wanted to wrap up by asking the same question to all of you quickly to end this on an optimistic note. Which is, what is an example of something that you've seen in the past year that makes you feel optimistic about the future sustainability of Chinese tourism? And I'll start with Schubert, please.
So I think it's really recycling. If there's one word, it's recycling. I think the government has imposed very strict recycling rules in all the cities around China. And that's been really also been extended over to attractions. So you can see many attractions have implemented multiple color recycle system, and people are following those rules. There are enforcers in location to do that. So I think for the last year, we've been educated. We've been complying with what needs to be done. And that to me is a very promising sign that when they now go to other locations, outbound especially, they will then be more willing to follow those rules.
Great, that's a good one. And Roy, let's ask you next. What makes you optimistic from the past year?
Might sound weird a little bit, but there is some positive aspect of people not being able to travel abroad, because then it helps to develop the local destinations into the needs of what previously travelers could only find abroad. So if there is a certain type, for example, Chinese tourists, of course, were a key segment of the visitors to Thailand, and they came to see specific things, specific services and products, and now being unfortunately not able to go to Thailand, for example, some of these services and needs need to be met within China. And I've already seen quite a lot of changes, and one of them, I don't want to echo too much what Schubert says, but this is an example of changing behavior because of that later on will affect also when the Chinese market will go back to travel abroad.
Thank you. And then last up, Zheng Yu, please.
Thank you, Sienna. I think my always as my slide that wildlife-friendly tourism should be the part of a very important part of sustainable tourism in China, and because it covers the elements like animal welfare, also cover that we should minimize the influence of animals in their habitat and biodiversity conservation. So in my ideal thinking that I think if you go to say wildlife related travel, that should be observing wild animals in the natural habitat and from a safe and respect distance where the animals could have opportunities to express their natural behaviors. So that might be more ideal, yes, for this wildlife-friendly tourism. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, before the pandemic, when Chinese could still travel abroad, especially last summer, I saw quite a few fam trips and Chinese celebrities visiting Namibia, especially, and kind of looking at animals in their natural habitat and making this look like you know, really aspirational kind of travel. So hopefully that increases the appeal of tourism that does not harm animals and actually helps these local communities to protect their animal populations. So thank you all once again for joining us and for your incredible insights. And I will look forward to staying in touch with all of you in the future. And thank you very much for everyone for attending today. And I'll be in touch tomorrow to share the slides from today's presentation with you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.